Don. It just has to be done. I don't make the rules. Good evening, good evening. Hope everyone's doing well. Let us know if you can hear us and see my screen. I've got just some links ready and some other stuff. But yeah, look.
Good. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. Not bad, actually. Yesterday was very chill. Some price action to watch. Some birthday cake to eat. Some cyberpunk to play. You know, the usual.
The usual.
Pretty good. Pretty good. How about yourself?
I finished moving-ish.
Yeah.
Now I just need to settle in. So, that's a little bit like rebuilding the bed, rebuilding all that kind of shit. Always takes a while, but it's good. It's good. Happy to be settling in.
That's good to hear. Okay, let's get rolling. First of all, a thank you, of course, to Bybit for sponsoring Technical Roundup. Their links can be found in the description below. If you'd like to support us, support the sponsor, support the stream, all that good stuff. So be sure to check them out. And of course, thank you to them for working with us. Jump says, Don sounds better than Wednesday today. Yeah, it's because of me, you know. It's the influence I have on him. He just turns into another person altogether.
Yeah. It just makes me happy.
Exactly. Yeah, no. Yesterday was fine. We'll talk about Bitcoin, obviously, as I put in the title. I think Bitcoin is interesting. Altcoins are very interesting, and there's just some news stories and other stuff that I want to discuss as well. That's kind of a healthy mix between funny and interesting as well. And obviously, you know, it may look like whenever these casual Friday things happen, the topics are predetermined. But what normally happens is we scramble to get a guest in the last second. All of our friends bail, and then I just have to come up with topics I don't warn the duck about. So this is as fresh for him as it is for you a lot of the time that we cover this stuff. So no secrets there. Of course, if you have any questions or if there's anything you want us to touch upon, you know, this is the least structured session during the week. Not that that's a bad thing, but it is what it is. So let us know if something else that's just, you know, been moving around in your head and you're desperate to just speak the good word about a certain topic.
Not really, no. I mean, for me, it's just
strong
been
views, opinions.
It's been little charts, a lot of other stuff for me.
Yeah.
So really haven't looked into too much. I mean, Bitcoin's interesting for sure. A little bit of a stronger bounce than I anticipated. It's going to be interesting going into daily close, and then everything else. I mean, I've seen some altcoins show some strength, and other ones just completely eviscerate. So, I mean, seems to be the same topic of some are doing good, some are doing bad kind of deal like we've had in the last few weeks to months.
And it doesn't seem to be shifting much between those kind of sectors either. It's just like DeFi gets bid, right? And you basically and you gamble with everything else. Yeah, it's pretty pretty interesting. We'll spend a lot of time on Bitcoin. I want to touch on the kind of lighter topics, news, more humorous things first, if that's okay with you, if it's okay with the chat as well. Because, you know, we do technicals pretty much every time. So Fridays when we relax a little bit, at least. The first thing I want to mention is the institutional weak hands thing. And this isn't as much humor, but I think it's actually quite interesting. I don't know if you saw this, but Nextech bought some Bitcoin for their treasury. And when that article came out about the seeming, what looked like a double spend, although it wasn't, apparently. It's actually a very technical discussion. I don't know how closely you've been following this. But it's just like the ordering of, there's like the block order. Apparently it's fine if you read the white paper. Listen, I have a thread bookmarked on the whole technical side of it. But my understanding from a kind of very high level summary is that one of the news outlets called it a double spend, but in the orthodox understanding of how Bitcoin blocks work, it wasn't a double spend, right? Do you have any further insights just on the describing kind of what happened?
No, I mean, that's basically how I understand it too. Like, I saw BitMEX research report on it, which is one of the best sources, in my opinion, in the crypto space.
Still, yeah, agreed.
When they kind of put something out that is kind of like worrying, you definitely need to look into it. But it seems like they've just kind of screwed up.
They walked back a little bit, right? They
did. And I mean, I've seen this happen multiple times now, where people are like, "Oh, this was a double spend, whatever," and it's just based on the fact how many confirmations you get, and wouldn't work. Like I saw like one guy saying like if it was like a 21 million double spend, that would have worked too, and it's like it's not how it works. But I mean, I'm not an expert, but
sure.
So like for me, it's kind of like I just listen to the experts, the people that I trust in this in this realm, and everyone that I talked with that has any idea what they're talking about said that's not a big deal, and it's kind of like supposed to happen like this. So I mean, I tend to trust my advisors, my trusty, smart people around me, because I'm not.
Because I'm not one of them either, not with this stuff anyway. But interestingly enough, as it says, Nextech, which was one of the companies which that hopped on the sailor train, or boat, if you will. It's more like Noah's Ark in his mind, isn't it? So I guess boat works better. It's one of these companies with Bitcoin treasury holdings, and they actually sold as the news was developing. And it's quite interesting. I think it was the CEO speaking. If this globenewswire.com. It says that a critical flaw called a double spend may have occurred, which, if true, allows someone to double spend. And if the system is built on scarcity and faith in the system, then double spend would eliminate both the basically just rejects the value proposition in the first place. So I've decided to move to cash as the story is unfolding. And, that was a profitable sell, if you will, because I'm assuming they bought earlier, said booked approximately $200,000 profit. And so there's a lot of commentary on this, that this is like weak hands and shaken out, whatever. But I don't know. I think this is pretty reasonable. I find it hard to hate on this, because it's quite clear that they've thought about why they want to hold Bitcoin, right? They saw some news which was reasonably reputable and acted pretty quickly on it, because as a result of it directly affecting their kind of reason for the position in the first place. And they can always buy back, right? If they really want to, if they can, revisit the topic, and if Bitcoin's other features, given that nothing's really changed, they could just reestablish the position. But this seemed pretty kind of reasonable on its face, because I think a lot of these companies that are chasing the trend of just adding Bitcoin to treasuries don't really know or necessarily care to a large extent, or at least as much as it may seem, like why they actually want Bitcoin, or what function it may serve in their treasury. But this seems pretty like level-headed. You've got a reason for holding it. There's some likely price-sensitive information coming out that may affect the reason for holding it, and so you cash out and then maybe you buy back later. What do you think of this?
I mean, the thing he said is completely accurate, right? If it was a double spend, I mean, if you don't get the fuck out, you're an idiot. Sure. The thing is, like, it was not. Or at least it wasn't really like as bad as it was made out to be.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, I mean, you just have to look at what they had and what they sold it for, right? So they had 130 Bitcoin, sold it for 200K profit. So, I mean, you can kind of calculate how much they were up on it, which is not a lot, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's barely, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I've been moving the entire day, but that's not even like 2K per coin, right? So I mean, they were bound to go underwater, and then I think it's just like panic sell, pretty much.
It's like the break-even trader, right?
Yeah, I mean, under the guise of being like, okay, yeah, it's a double spend, I want to get out. It's kind of like, nah, dude.
That's actually a good point. I hadn't considered that. Maybe I give them too much credit, but. But that'd be funny either way. I don't know who manages this shit so actively. That's the pretty interesting part of it as well. I wonder how many of these companies legit just follow all the Bitcoin news and kind of have someone to tell them how market, price sensitive it is and stuff. Anyway, pretty interesting. I wonder if we'll see more of this as volatility picks up in either direction. We saw Sailor add a little bit, right, on the dip. Via MicroStrategy, but it really wasn't that much. What was it? Was it 10 mil or something?
Dude, it was. It's so fucking weird to kind of see this happen. It's like this one guy, like we've all seen these people that just like put everything in, and that's kind of how it looks like when you're watching what he's doing. Like after the big stuff that he's pulled earlier, like just investing 10 mil is just like, okay, I've just found like 10 million in my couch cushion, and I want to put it like on top of it. It's the last rest that I have left. It's kind of crazy to see, but I mean,
it certainly gets the engagement going, right?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, if he's like that much in a panic about USD holdings, why not, right? I mean, if he has that much conviction, all power to him.
The melting ice cube, yeah, pretty fast-moving theory. Let's call it that. I don't know. I'm just excited to see how that develops. Like, if we get, who else joins the fight if we keep going way higher, and clearly there's a stock benefit. At least if you're right, if you're on the right side of it, to become this. I saw this investment letter, which discussed MicroStrategy, and they called it like a free call option, essentially. Like holding MicroStrategy shares is like a free call option on Bitcoin, right? Which is a pretty interesting way of putting it. Or like it turned into a de facto Bitcoin hedge fund, which is equally hilarious. So it'd be interesting to see who else kind of joins the fight and tries to grab a piece of that pie. If prices go higher, kind of like a proxy for Bitcoin for a lot of these funds who just want to hold stocks as opposed to invest in Bitcoin, given there's no like ETF and other stuff. But also to the downside, right? If we get some sort of repeat or deeper pullback, whatever, who starts puking out of the recently allocated? That's also kind of worth bearing in mind. And I think we'll probably get some pretty decent top and bottom signals or indications based on what these suits do with Bitcoin as volatility picks up. I think that'll be interesting. Because I know you have conviction that like the 10K bottom, for example, was literally Sailor's buys being executed on Coinbase and stuff. So it clearly has some sort of impact,
Yeah, I mean, big money entering like a small space.
Yeah,
has a big impact. Yeah,
that's pretty.
And I mean, if they're leaving too, like that's gonna be having a big impact too. It's just like most of these guys have a pretty long time horizon.
Yeah.
So they don't mind holding a while. If it starts like super nuking, they probably wouldn't be comfortable holding. But then again, like the question is, does it go down that far? While we have some prominent people buying in, who knows?
I'm at least glad we managed to disprove the whole myth of we'll never get 30% corrections because it's institutional now. Like, I'm so glad that's out the window. Because you almost had to entertain it to a point because every single dip was so shallow, right? But that's always dangerous because it just instills this false sense of confidence that whenever you get like a double-digit dip, you buy and you're like quote-unquote safe, right? Whereas it may seem on the surface that the difference between like a 10% pullback and a 30% pullback isn't that great. Like when you actually do the maths, there's a huge bloody difference, especially when you're trading size between pullbacks of that nature. Like if you're looking from a high time frame, you're kind of like, yeah, it's like a macro pullback or whatever. But I'm sure you remember, and we discussed on stream, the magical idea that you just buy any double-digit down day and things go well. I'm at least glad that we're getting some recognizable version of Bitcoin where we're seeing 30% plus, right? It's not a... I'm glad that's still around.
I mean, it comes around every single cycle, right? I mean, I still remember, like in 17, even though we just had like a 40% pullback, it was like, okay, we've had this now. It's not going to happen again because that would be too obvious. Yeah. And then it happened again, and then it's like the same story. Like it's not going to happen again, and then it happens again. Like I mean, it's just how this market works, right? It works off of FOMO. It works off of people being. I mean, just like, I mean, FUD. I hate the word FUD, but I mean, it's kind of, I mean, you saw that, I mean, what were they called? The company is that Panic sold. Forgot the name.
Oh, Next-Tech, I think.
Yeah, Next-Tech. Yeah, I mean, it seems to be working, right? I mean, it's just how this market works. You get like big down days where people just get super scared and it just goes down massively, and then you get these big updates or up swings in general, and I don't think that's ever gonna change. I hope it doesn't. Be pretty boring if it would.
We got FOMO, FUD, and memes. I think are the three pillars of cryptocurrency trading. Just those three seem like pretty good candidates. I know people want us to jump into markets. We'll in a sec. The final thing I want to mention, which is probably the most meme of them all, is everyone's favorite rapper, and he's just as relevant now as he was in the 2000s. Of course, Soulja Boy, right? And you know, he was tweeting asking like what shitcoins he should buy and where he should buy them. You can see here Cobain's vintage, have fun staying poor, kind of coming into play as well. But you know, Soldier Boy was basically tweeting about crypto a shit ton, and then asking where to buy it, what to buy, and then finally today kind of feels like a shout out to McAfee back when he wasn't in jail. We seem to have his own kind of list of bags, and he's got BNB, DGB, TRX, KLV, ZPAE, and FDO. And he says, "What's next? Let's go!" Check mark. You know, that obviously instills a lot of confidence.
Do you think he was paid for this?
I think for some of them at least, right? He has to be paid for some of them. Luke made this amazing tweet where he compares quick analysis of Soldier Boy's crypto portfolio. FDO is a total market cap of 4 Bitcoin. KLV market cap doesn't even show up, and the bid-ask spread is 8% on Bittrex. And this is my favorite one. ZPAE has a picture of NPXS on their product website, but forgot to crop NPXS. So, I mean, this is, I don't know, whoever's doing his fundamental analysis is, maybe not doing any.
Yeah, I mean, either he got paid for it or he just bought like the bags of a homie of his, just OTC, that promised him the moon, just for like, I don't know. It's just Soldier Boy.
This is pretty,
why am I not surprised?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, thing is, people always love to point to this stuff as kind of top signal sort of things, and I tend to agree, but you have to like time these things appropriately in their context. Like, we were getting a lot of quote-unquote top signals, I'm sure you remember, at like 17k, right? The same old memes, the same old headlines, the same people were coming back, and celebrities asking about Bitcoin, like, you know, Maisie Williams, whether she should buy. I mean, what a hero, by the way. Easy 2x plus since she bought. JK Rowling, all this kind of stuff. So I think it's important to keep a gauge on how many normies are kind of getting involved in the space, and more importantly, I think, not just involved, but to what capacity, right? Like, do they just hear about Bitcoin, or are they actually just investing and, you know, quitting their jobs to become crypto traders? There's like a big spectrum there, right? I think a lot of the time people squish those things too closely together. Like, oh, all normies are talking about Bitcoin, therefore we're at a cycle top, etc. But like, I think when people who aren't normally in markets get involved with markets, there's a very broad range of behaviors, all of which indicate different levels of frothiness, right? Like, if they read like tech magazines and stuff, and a tech magazine said that Bitcoin's gone up a lot, that's quite different from someone who's never traded before, 6 months later quitting their job to trade crypto full time.
Which is kind of happening in the traditional markets, right? Which is kind of crazy, right? We have it all over, but not as much as we've used to have in crypto, which is kind of funny, because crypto usually is the kind of market that promotes that kind of behavior. Something I want to say about like these celebrity tweets is that, I mean, we like to meme about it, but in general, like how this kind of stuff ends up is, I mean, they start shilling it or like talk about it, and then it doesn't top right after, because it wouldn't really make sense, right? I mean, people don't hear about it, and then they see it on these tweets. I mean, people have to buy first, right? So, I mean, this always takes a while. Yeah. You see it all over the media, and then you actually see like gradual increase in buys from like retail, from people that aren't really interested in the space. They just want to get the gains. And then is when you might actually head towards the top. So while we like to meme about, oh yeah, this and this guy talked about Bitcoin, I mean, his fans, or like the celebrities' fans, I mean, they have to buy in first. It's just kind of how these markets work, right? I mean, everyone buys, and as the moment you run out of buyers, you kind of stop going up, and then it just starts dropping.
So it's a delayed signal, essentially, between celebrity shilling and then that being acted upon by their retail audience, right?
Yeah, I mean, in 17, it was kind of quick. We had like, we had celebrity shilling, and then it went up like a couple X. And then, like, just a few weeks after, it just mega nuke. But in general, I'd be surprised if this stuff goes quick, just based off of like the media attention. Like, right, you're not expecting. Okay, you see a tweet from someone that you dislike, and then it just now it's over, and it goes down 80%. It's usually not how it happens.
Yeah, exactly. That's what people expect, right? They see something, they're like, okay, I just shorted. It's like, well, I don't know whether that makes much sense. It's like what we wrote about in Technical Roundup. Like, whenever normies call something a bubble, it's probably got another 2x to go or something before it actually does anything. I actually want to ask you a question, which I haven't asked you in this context. Also, the chat can let us know their version. I'm keen to hear as well. Someone's already mentioned. Ben was saying the top signal. I was waiting for my coworker, Jamie, asking me how to buy crypto, and last week he asked, and it hasn't. But she actually hasn't bought it yet. So stuff like that. My kind of real life, the closest or the weirdest thing I've had so far, which is worse than in 2017, but again, my involvement was different, is I had a friend who's like a straight up, fashion designer and like completely opposite end of the world to markets, finance, etc. Send me a Tether FUD article. Tether FUD, and ask me like, what do I think? Is Bitcoin going up because of USDT? Like, what happens when they stop printing Tether and all this kind of stuff? So that to me was like, okay, holy shit, this is how is this even landing on people's desks? That to me was the crossing of the worlds, which I didn't ask for. What's your version? Have you had any real life kind of like, oh god, how is this a thing?
I mean, my family's been. I don't really mention that I'm in crypto much to anyone, really. I don't really feel much, like, I don't see the need to. I've never really liked to shit it either, because, I mean, if it goes down, you're kind of the asshole. And if it goes
up... you go down with it.
Yeah, and I mean, if it goes up, the thing is, I mean, you're just going to never hear the end of it, right? So you're going to get calls. I've done it before. I'm never doing it again. So I just try to avoid it. But people generally, like in the closer family, know that I have something to do with crypto.
Yeah.
Given I don't really work, and everyone's just like, okay, what the fuck does he actually do?
It's either that or drugs, right? It's
it's the one of the other. But it's the same thing for the financial. Like if you go and kind of do your taxes, and they're always like, when they look at your bank account, it's okay, this guy either does Bitcoin or does drugs. Yeah. No, but I got a lot of calls and messages asking me about it, like, oh shit, Bitcoin at 40k, or like the euro equivalent, what's up there. That has definitely increased. I think like pretty much everyone that knows that I'm in crypto has actually started messaging me about it. Which the last time that happened was in 17, but then again, I mean, just because stuff like that happens doesn't mean it has to go down.
Exactly.
If there's underlying strength in the market, I mean, it can get much, much more crazy. But yeah, I mean, there are some indications that there is the retail kind of crowd is coming back in, or at least showing interest.
Yeah, I wonder how bad it'll get before it gets better. But for me, I mean, dude, getting Tether articles is just, for me, was the most unbelievable thing ever. Because Tether is so like crypto native, but then it's also becomes like the most low-hanging fruit ever. Because what I've discovered is people, like intellectuals, make for kind of shitty traders a lot of the time, at least on the discretionary side. Because they try to kind of intellectualize why everything happens, and they need to establish like clear causal links between A and B, and there's always a reason or a framework or a justification, a rigid set of principles. I think on the quantitative side, that's certainly a functional framework, but for anyone trading, a bit more dynamically with more discretion, at least in my experience, you kind of realize that those really hard rules and A caused B, which caused C sort of stuff, it just isn't very helpful, if not impossible. The way I tried to explain it was like, there are hundreds of thousands, whatever, a ton of systems working the same instrument at the same time, buying, selling for different reasons on different time frames and different sizes, etc. It's not always so simple as price went up because of X, right? Or price went down because of Y. Like sometimes at certain points, especially when it's news driven or catalyzed, some explanations are have far more explanatory power than others, but I think generally in the absence of those big macro catalysts, a lot of the time it's almost arbitrary when you ascribe causation to market moves, right? Because I think market microstructure is just a bit more complicated than A happened and therefore that led to B happening. I think it's just a bit more intricate under the hood. But of course, if you're in financial journalism, what you always see is instrument rises or drops X%, and then there's always like at the end you've got like a because clause, right? You always need an explainer why that happened, because otherwise people just almost can't make sense of a market moving without a reason. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I always find that to be the first kind of thing people jump to. Why is it going up? Why would it stop going up? What's making this happen? You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of in the human nature to kind of try to find an explanation for what is happening. In markets, it's pretty difficult. I think I mean, if you just look at it as okay, there's more buying interest at this price than there's selling interest, so price goes up. I mean, that's as simple as you can make it. And I think that's probably going to do you better than just trying to chase the narratives. I mean, something that I like to say is that if you're kind of chasing these narratives that are coming around, you're always going to get wrecked by the market, because the moment it's kind of obvious what the narrative is, it's almost always too late for it. So what you kind of have to do is anticipate a narrative. So, I mean, you see the Corona crisis, for example, and a few people did this really well. Okay, there's going to be government support. Okay, there's going to be this printing meme. And then you can kind of build a narrative around that and then apply that to Bitcoin or to any market, really. And that worked really well this year. I think if you do it that way around, you're going to do much better than just chasing the global markets are dropping because coronavirus narrative, and then you're bearish, and then it bounces, and you're like, okay, what is happening? And it goes back up, and then at some point, when it's all the way back up, the narrative comes around. Oh yeah, there's so much printing that hard assets are just gonna go up, and then you're like, okay, I mean, you're just sitting there having lost a shitload of money trying to chase the narrative, while the better play would have been, okay, what does this actually mean? And what is the narrative going to be? Because, I mean, if you're just going to chase it all the time, and I mean, it's the same with price, right?
Yeah.
If you're chasing price all the time, you're not going to do well. So, yeah.
Very good points. Yeah, I think when a narrative becomes... thing is, there's always a nice window when the narrative just works. Like, for example, that period of time where midnight UTC just started selling, right? But there's always that uncomfortable window where you kind of expect it, but a lot of people don't want to risk any money on it in case this time is different, right?
Yeah.
Like, people were out there tweeting, like, oh, the Tokyo Open is going to absolutely wreck us. And then they would either buy the dip or, like, not sell at all, despite kind of having that expectation that price would happen. So there's always that kind of awkward growth like, middle phase, where the narrative is kind of there, but you don't have the conviction or the scope to act on it, which gets pretty tricky. The final thing I want to touch on, and I know this is a favorite of yours, is actually GameStop.
Jesus.
So this looks hilarious, right? And if you just look at the monthly chart or the quarterly chart, this is incredible, right? Even just the weekly, the last couple of weeks, from low to high, 300%, not bad for. I mean, this is GameStop, right? This is like a physical, as in my understanding. This is the physical store where you go and buy video games and DVDs and shit, right? As far as I know, although there are some quote-unquote fundamentals, like some leadership changes and whatever. Yeah, exactly, that type of crap. This is primarily a Wall Street bets coin, right? This is one of those classic ones where this... You know what? I'm gonna let you describe it because you've got a certain way of categorizing the behavior that goes on in these stocks.
No, I mean, it's one of the most amazing stories that we've had in a long, long time.
Yeah.
Where it's just one subreddit, basically, or in general Reddit, just decide, okay, this stock is. It was the most heavily shorted stock according to Wall Street Bets. I haven't even looked into it myself too much, but according to Wall Street Bets, GameStop was the most heavily shorted stock. So they were like, okay, stocks are going up. We can squeeze these people. And it's kind of hilarious because it's kind of an ant versus giant battle, right? So you have these small Reddit accounts, barely have any money, probably throw in their last like 1K, right? Trying to squeeze out these giants that are shorting this for fundamental reasons. And I mean, GameStop was kind of at least tethering on the brink of collapse. I mean, it was pretty much, it's GameStop, right? No one's buying physical games anymore. So yeah, it was heavily shorted, and they were just like, okay, let's squeeze these idiots out. And it's so hilarious because, I mean, for some reason it's actually working. So all these Reddit idiots came together, made a cult, and said, okay, this thing is going up and we're going to squeeze these big boys. And yeah, you're kind of seeing what happened after. It's actually working, which is one of the first times I've ever seen that. If not, I think that might be the first time that's ever happened actually on this kind of scale, where it's just like people getting together on the internet and then just deciding, okay, we're going to wreck these people, which is hilarious.
How do we get these people to trade shitcoins? That's my question. And this is actually a very good argument you made when altcoins, including the DeFi stuff, which hadn't really kicked off yet, all looked really rough. Your whole point was our kind of alt season equivalent was essentially taken away by Robinhood and US equities, right?
Yeah. I still think that's the case. I mean, you had the idiots coming into crypto, and I mean for good reason, right? In 17, crypto was easy to trade. You can easily get in, can easily get out. Most people didn't plan on getting out, but the market kind of did that for them. But it's like that easy accessibility was something that the stock markets didn't really have, and now we have Robinhood, we have a bunch. I mean, you just have to go to YouTube or Reddit or Facebook or whatever, and you're gonna get an ad
TikTok,
for
even worse,
trading.
Right?
Yeah, you get an ad for a trading platform or a way to trade stocks, and stocks are just easier for most people because I mean, let's be real. Like understanding what these coins do, it's not necessarily the most simple of tasks, and oftentimes it just sounds weird, and oftentimes it is, right? And then you have these old names like GameStop, where everyone can kind of like has an image in their mind of what that is, and they're not kind of feeling like they're buying something scary. They're buying an actual company. So I mean, I think that's been definitely taken away some of the people that would have otherwise come into the altcoin space. Not all of them, obviously, and I mean, us crypto natives, I mean, most of the crypto natives have been seeing a rise of their portfolio, to say the least, going from 4K Bitcoin to 40K. So there's a lot of money to be spent in altcoins, which means that there can be giant bids comparative to the size of the altcoins. But yeah, I think the market, like the appeal of the shitcoin space basically is the same one as kind of this stuff. So they're competing with each other, which we didn't really have in 17, in my opinion.
Who's winning?
I mean, definitely I mean, you just have to look at the size of the Wall Street bets subreddit against the subreddit of crypto stuff. It's not even comparable. Like that, I've never seen. I mean, it reminds me of the 17 crypto bubble, the stuff that's happening in the traditional markets. But yeah, it's growing massively per day. I mean, everyone's talking about it. It's a new kind of pastime, and they're winning for sure. I mean, it doesn't mean that altcoins won't go up. It just means that there's a few less people this time around, but I mean, everyone has much more money this time around, so yeah, maybe it doesn't really matter.
You know, Loomdart was commenting on the sort of macro social dynamics, especially with economies being just like, I mean, full countries being locked down, essentially. You can't work. But you still need to make something, especially if you're young, right? And so you end up with a choice, and it's either trading short-dated, short-term options in US equity markets or OnlyFans, right? That's your kind of red pill, blue pill sort of thing. Are you going to gamble in financial markets, or is it OnlyFans? And maybe then you can put like a little third category for Twitch streaming, whatever. Not that there's any edge in that, and it's like the most saturated thing in the world at this point. I don't know. It's a very weird version of the world, which I'm not sure I have a lot of time for.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan, honestly. I mean, when you have these kind of choices, right? I mean, I get, like, if you're looking at housing prices, if you're looking at pretty much prices for anything, really. I mean, 5 years ago, I couldn't have thought about like getting even close to buying anything like a house.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, it's even like the prices are even worse. And the only reason why like houses are affordable is because I'm a trader or investor, right? And I kind of agree with Loom that there's this weird kind of timeline going on where you either just risk a shitload to make livable, to be able to own something that's worth something, or you're just kind of screwed, right? And I'm not the biggest fan. I don't know how it's gonna end when everyone is gambling. I mean, maybe it just continues to be like that when we just all turn into gamblers.
Yeah.
But in my experience, like the new gamblers usually lose and lose a shitload at that. So it's going to be interesting how to see how this ends up. But
and we're not like gatekeeping trading, right? There's nothing special about any of it, and people should, if it makes sense for you, then it makes sense for you. But as the duck pointed out, it's nothing to do with oh, this is our thing, so if you're casual, you shouldn't do it. It's not that. It's just the ends. The means are so distinct from the ends, right? If the end is kind of financial freedom, this, that, etc., the overwhelming majority seeking to find that in their first month, whatever, trading financial markets, it sucks. You're almost certainly going to have a rough time. And even if you don't have a rough time, the chances that you keep that money are really bad. They're just really not that good. I keep re-emphasizing this point, but we lost friends. Like, they didn't die. I mean, who knows? Some of them just disappeared. But like, for all the winners in 2017, a lot of people afterwards just lost everything and then some, right? And even those who didn't lose everything and then some, there's a reason that they're still here trading in 2020, trying to make the most of the current conditions, right? It's by no means easy to play this correctly, at least in the long term, right? So, speaking of which, I think it's a good time to look at Bitcoin, given the developments we've had. I had a really good time trading this yesterday, actually. Well, the thing is, I had a good time and a bad time, right? The good time was, of course, the outcome of my punts. I essentially hedged my exposure on the breakdown and retest of 32k. And, not that it matters, but I tweeted all this crap anyway. So this is the good part, right? The actual outcome was positive. Because it wasn't on this retest, I think. It was on the earlier one that squeezed a little bit. It was around here, 32k retested. It was my birthday and all that kind of stuff. And I just one delta hedged my Bitcoin exposure, right? Which means I took a short on an inverse futures contract to equivalent to the size of my spot holdings and not more, right? So I wasn't net short, I was hedged 1-to-1. And then I closed the hedge through the monthly open as well. That's kind of my first trouble area, and this just went down in a straight line. So from a trading point of view, I mean, fantastic, right? Like, caught the bulk of the move, barely offside, and closed before the V reversal. Feels great. What's the downside of that? Like, neither of them were really technical trades. The reason I got in at 32k was because I was trying to play Cyberpunk 2077, and having like TradingView open was just taking up unnecessary resources on my PC. And I was getting distracted and missing dialogues from side quests and stuff. So I was like, fuck it, it's my birthday. I want to relax and, not have to look at the chart and, properly unwind. So I decided it was kind of in an area of resistance. I kind of looked at my mobile app and saw it around here. Sold it and then went to play video games, right? And then the reason for closing it, yeah, I mean, there's some technical basis based on the monthly and yearly open. But realistically, I was just kind of tired. And I had stuff to do this morning. So I was like, well, I'll just close. And it went down the straight line anyway. So we'll see what happens. And then, reversed from those levels. So, good news, good trades. Bad news had almost nothing to do with TA. So, every time that kind of stuff happens, I just have to ask myself, am I fooled by randomness or just kind of blind leading the blind sort of thing? Maybe I should just trade based on how much I want to play games or how hungry I am or how tired I am. And that will generate better returns than whatever the fuck I'm doing otherwise.
I mean, when you see like weakness creep into a market like that, and you get a bad feeling about it, I don't mind taking the punt in that kind of instance. Even more so, given, I mean, whenever you have these breakdowns, these technical breakdowns, you usually get at least a second leg, and that's pretty much what you played. So, I mean, I think there's very many valid TA reasons for what you did. But I mean,
with arbitrary reasoning in the moment though.
Yeah.
Either way,
it's probably like in the back of your mind, right?
Yeah,
That's
exactly. I've got something
works.
there, right? It's sort of some sort of basis for it. So that's kind of where I am with these things. With regard to where the market's right now, do you want to jump in and screen share any of that stuff? Let us know what you're looking for, either for the daily close or anything really.
Yeah, I mean, I can. Give me a second. Should be working.
Also, I just love how my mum's cake got much better engagement than me explaining my hedge and like what a hedge is with inverse futures. It's just quintessential crypto Twitter. I was talking to Gainsey about this, and I'm trying to, basically, if I were to rephrase it differently, you could make one of those clout engagement bait tweets that, I shorted, I'm bearish this price, and then I bought this price. It'd get like 10 times the likes, all that kind of crap. But when I use terms like hedged or closed hedges, it looks like a cop-out almost, right? So then I'm like, fuck it, people don't care anyway, I'll just post the cake that my mum made, and then suddenly my notifications start blowing up. Also,
I mean, everyone loves cake.
Everyone loves, especially birthday cake. It has that special, so it's got special properties. But just to be clear, people, I got one message saying, if you've been trading for so long, why do you still live with your? Because I said my mum made the cakes. Like, why do you still live with your parents? And just to be clear, I don't live with my parents. That'd be ridiculous after trading for so long and becoming independent. I live in my parents' basement, for which rent has been waived indefinitely. Okay? So I needed to clarify that on the record before any more mistruths were spread about my living conditions.
I mean, it would be an unwise financial decision to do otherwise, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's just obvious. No, what I'm watching for Bitcoin and what I've been watching for Bitcoin is, given that the daily levels are kind of hard to act upon, and I'll go over this in a bit, are these 4-hour support resistance levels, right? So we got rejected here at this 4-hour resistance, broke down on the, I think that was the news that there was gonna be more regulations on crypto.
Oh, was that the Yellen candle?
that was the Yellen candle, yeah. So it went down from there, kind of retested support, and this is something that I like to watch a lot, and this is something that we talked about on the Wednesday stream. So you have this 4-hour support that holds multiple times, right? You break down and you keep on kind of smashing, excuse my drawing skills, you keep on smashing these lows, right? So you have a low here, you kind of SFP or whatever you want to call it through it, do the same thing, go back up, and then do the same thing here, right? And whenever you see this kind of stuff happen where you get like wicks below wicks and then do it again, and people are just trying to long it every time because, I mean, it's an SFP, you just long these. It's kind of how most people trade. That is one of my favorite kind of breakdown kind of looks to a chart. So whenever I see this, and we talked about this last Wednesday, I start getting these breakdown feelings, and I get more aggressive on my breakdown shorts. And then what we did was we broke down a little bit, got into H4 support, bounced from there, reclaimed the lost support, turned it into support for a little bit, and then just nuked through it. And this is something that happens a lot in these kind of choppy conditions, and it's something that I think we're going to get a lot more of in the next few days, where you get invalidations of setups, and then the setup plays out afterwards. Mm-hmm. And in those cases, and this is something that I don't really mind doing, is even if you get into, like, let's say this breaks down, you get into a breakdown short, right? Which is, I mean, I don't necessarily like breakdown shorting too much, but let's say you did in this case, you get stopped out on a candle close above the level, you just get back in for a second try the moment the setup presents itself again. Mm-hmm. Because in these kind of choppy conditions, what oftentimes happens is that the early movers kind of get screwed over, and then the setup plays. So we got a retest of that H4 resistance, broke down completely, and then bounced. And now we're kind of heading back into resistance. I could see the same thing play out again, where it just kind of reclaims it and then chops around and eventually just retests lower. The only kind of way that I would be turning neutral to bullish again would be just starting to close back in this previous range in here. So
what would the daily requirement be for you to kind of be like, okay, daily close, and this looks like a bottom?
And the same thing is actually true where I could see fake outs. Same for the daily, honestly, because what you have is this weird situation where you have a very obvious support that we broke through close below, right? So that's gonna obviously, I mean, people are gonna look at that and see if there's gonna be any resistance there. But you also have this level here, which is the lowest close of that breakdown. So I could see us close in between here. So everyone's kind of like, okay, what am I going to do now? And then either move back up, which, I mean, would make me, like, if we start closing back above this breakdown candle, I would think, okay, we're probably going to go higher. If we start closing back above this box, I'd be very, very surprised if we didn't just completely mega squeeze to the upside. But given that the daily kind of, for the first time in a long time, lost support, I'd expect at least that this daily resistance is going to act as resistance for a day or two or three. But yeah, if we start closing back above there, I wouldn't want to be bearish anymore. But for me, I've been saying be bullish until proven otherwise on most of this rally. And this is kind of what proves otherwise, right? And if it kind of is a fake out, which it obviously could be, it will show you by closing back in the 35, 36, 37 range, where it's probably going to go to 50, 60, 70K, right? If it does that. So I wouldn't really mind having a losing trade in this area if that made me kind of get a winning trade into the 40, 50, 60K area. And the downside of that we could be having here is 26, 24, which I think would be relatively realistic given that we've broken down. But I mean, it's still a really, really strong bullish kind of move. The only thing that would kind of make me a little bit worried, and does make me a little bit worried, is that we've kind of had this parabolic movement to the upside, broke it to the downside, and if you're like, okay, you can redraw parabolas a million times.
I was going to say, just redraw it.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, we've actually broken horizontal support as well, right, for the first time in a long time. If that is reclaimed, I mean, it's all good. I think then it makes sense to be bullish again, and I'm completely fine taking a haircut there. But yeah, until that happens, I don't really see too much reason to be too aggressive, at least. Like, I mean, if you want to be a little bit defensive, have a little bit on it, like bet a little bit on it, breaking to the upside, it's fine by me. But if you're like all inning, I don't really see a good reason for it. But yeah, just gonna have to wait and see. I mean, for me, if you really want to be bearish, you could easily just wait for the daily close, see if it is below 32, and then see if we do get like another move to the downside to 26. I think that would make sense if you're not in from higher, which, I mean, didn't really give much time, like I said in the last stream. It's just, it's been this H4 level, which gave a really nice entry, in my opinion. And then even that broke to the downside, bounced pretty bigly. So we'll see how it goes.
Have the high time frames started forming in a way to give you anything actionable or relevant? I know you had the meme tweet about fixing the monthly candle. It seems like the workers arrived at the scene to start repairs, but they've only got a week, and because of COVID regulations, they can't be there at the work site all day. So either on the monthly or the weekly, is there anything 3-day even? Because we know those time frames, we haven't been able to pay a ton of attention to them simply because of this market. But is there anything relevant there?
No, I mean, for the high time frames, is still clearly bullish. Something I've talked about last stream is, I mean, this would still be incredibly bullish if we went back to 14K, right? I'm not saying we're going to 14K before I get killed again, right? But I mean, we've had this range in here. We had this move to the upside, and I mean, even if you turn on the log chart, right, you can kind of see that would just be the retest of the highest monthly close. Wouldn't be too terrible, right? If you're looking at this chart without knowing that it's Bitcoin and without knowing that that would be a massive move to the downside. But like the high time frames, they have a shitload of room to go down and still be bullish, right? That's just kind of shows you how crazy this bullish move has been. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I mean, for me, before I say, okay, high time frames are bearish again, it would have to go to 14K and close below it, where, I mean, that's just doesn't really help you much, right? So high time frames, incredibly bullish. The weekly, I mean, nothing there. I mean, you could expect an all-time high retest if you wanted to, but I mean, it's not really an indication that it wants to go there. So far, it's just a pullback in an otherwise insanely bullish trend, right? So that's something that you kind of have to, when you're playing these daily breakdowns, whatever, that you have to keep in mind. I mean, the high time frames are incredibly bullish. I wouldn't bet the house on this. Don't really see a reason to. I like the hedge ideas that you've been doing, just hedging at resistance, unhedging at support, kind of playing like that. I could even see this chop for a long time, right? And then I think that would be the most bullish outcome of this all. Like if this just chops, it would be a weird end to a parabolic rise.
Yeah, it really would. That'd be like the most bullish end to a parabola break ever, right? The market just moves sideways and gets reaccumulated. That'd be mental. You have to like 2x your targets, I think, if that happens.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, if this just chops, I think that'd be insanely bullish. And then I expect much, much higher. The only kind of way that this turns into something really bearish is if it just starts losing all the supports, which I'm not expecting. So I think in general, we're in a market where it's not only up anymore. It's up and down, in my opinion, until proven otherwise. And that's how I plan to kind of look at the market, trade the market, and see what's up. Yeah.
Good point. Yeah. I mean, my views are similar. Like, what exists on the bullish side? I mean, the high time frames, obviously the first point. I think the second point is the measured move of the correction has landed more or less at your sweet spot at 30%. Just over. Does that mean that's guaranteed the bottom? No. Does that mean that when price is down there at the yearly open, 30% down, not the best time to chase? I mean, I'd like to think so. At least,
yeah.
Right? That always provides some context. I think people misuse the percentage move thing. They use it as a kind of guaranteed, okay, it can't go down more than 30%, because that's how much bull market's correct. So if I just put my stop loss at like 32%, or my liquidation at like, anything beyond the 30% correction, I'll be fine. It's not quite how it works. That's important. I agree with you in terms of closes. I think there's space for ambiguity. And I've similarly argued that, well, I mean, we bloody write the technical roundup together. So, I mean, all the arguments are kind of have one home of being up until proven otherwise. And also for me, daily market structure is always a big one. Like if you look at the daily time frame, when was the last time we had a lower high into a lower low? I really can't remember. I think you have to look all the way back to like 12K before 10K. Like literally the last pullback ever, basically in Bitcoin. That's the last time you had daily market structure that looked wasn't fully comprised of lower highs and lower lows, right? You've got the lower high here, and then the lower low, which hit that high time frame sailor buying support, and then you got the grind up, which eventually got quicker, etc., etc. From that point, all you've had is higher highs and higher lows until this breakdown, right? So that's important. Daily market structure, and the fact that this is also the first time that support has been lost on the closing basis on a pullback. So those are things that, like, are they death sentences? No. Would you be a bit ridiculous to ignore them completely? I mean, in my opinion, yes, but my opinion is informed by my personal experience, and virtually every single big win, as well as big loss for me, can be traced to ignoring daily market structure. Like, I don't know how else to put that, how else to emphasize that. Like, every time I've done really well, it's because I've acted and been patient with daily market structure. Every time I've just missed something really straightforward, which was avoidable, I've ignored something on the daily time frame or with daily market structure. So I'm always going to give it almost disproportionate weight when it comes to these things. Gianni says, Cred and Don were not trading in early 2017 and it shows. Not true. Missing the alt season completely, calling for BTC Doom. No one's calling for BTC Doom. Gianni was clearly not paying attention in school when they were teaching reading comprehension, because Jesus Christ, mate. That is not what we're saying at all. Whatever, man. Not everyone can read or interpret what people are saying. From a market structure point of view, just to be aware, you have a high, you've got a low, you've got a lower high, you've got a lower low, right? So this is what kind of a market structure shift looks like. And I agree with the Duck that even if you close above this support, you could end up in a tricky spot where if you take the lowest close, which is a level we discussed on live stream previously as well, you're kind of neither here nor there, right? You've reclaimed the support, but you're still at resistance from a market structure point of view. So it ends up being this kind of sucky area where you're probably hoping for a spring or continuation or like some sort of expansion candle, but not the best place to bet on it at the very least. Those of you who've watched the market structure video know that one of the sort of best setups or bullish setups that I like is when you get a lower low into a higher high, right? This is your straightforward stuff. If the market's bearish, you expect lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, etc. So when you get the lower low, which doesn't make a lower high, and instead makes a higher high, that's a sign of reversal, right? And it tends to be quite strong, and there's no reason why that stuff can't be applied on the daily time frame. So I think regardless of whether you want to use like this swing high candle here, I think that's pretty reasonable. The one at 38, 39k. I mean, I've seen arguments being made for this cluster consolidation here. I think that's fine, but it's just not as much as a swing point as 38, 39. I think that's reasonable, but for me, this is the real kind of lower high swing point, a bit more conservative. I think what you can quite reasonably do is take this swing high candle, right? And remember, lower low into a higher high is typically a good sign of reversal, right? So instead of doing business in this choppy, potentially retest area, God knows what's going to happen, I think the real place to put on risk for bullish continuation would be a higher high through 40k. At that point, whatever happens around, like in this area, you probably have the low in either here or some sort of higher low to define risk. And I think at that stage, if we get a higher high so close to the all-time high, with that context of a 30% pullback being bought so aggressively, the chances or the probability that all-time high resistance holds is way, way lower, in my point. So I suppose the summary version of my view is that this area of mid-30s is probably going to be tricky to trade on the long side, simply because of the likelihood of conflicting signals. So, okay, we reclaim support, but you close within the range. Or below the range, for example. Probably not as easy. I like to put on size when the trades are easy or more straightforward or clearer, whatever you want to call it. And for me, this is kind of an area where chop is much more likely. This, for me, is an area where chop is far less likely and price discovery is much more likely. So I'm not a huge fan, based on my personal experience, of fading daily market structure. Bearish daily market structure means lower lows and lower highs, and that will be invalidated when price makes a higher high. That would be a really... Yeah, is it a late sign of reversal or later sign of reversal? Yes. But does it just completely moon the probability that you're right? Also, yes, in my opinion. There's always trade-offs to these things, but I'd rather be patient rather than have to write in my trading journal that I just longed the daily close into whatever market structure, which looked a bit rough and ended up not having a great trade. I've kind of learned that the hard way, so I'm naturally going to be a bit more averse to those things.
I like it. We haven't even talked about altcoins yet, so probably should quickly go over them at least. I've seen some mention of alt season in the chat, which I mean we should talk about. Sure. Obviously.
Do you want to start ETH BTC? The DeFi stuff bounced crazy. Where do you want to go with this?
I mean, I don't really mind. I think ETH is an outlier. So is DeFi. Mm-hmm. It's just been incredibly strong. That's the one thing. Whenever I see alt season, is you really have to define which kind of sector you're talking about nowadays. Because, right, I've got people haunting me, telling me, okay, yeah, this is alt season. What are you talking about when you're saying altcoins are like not performing incredibly well? And you just look at Litecoin, for example, one of the major ones. It's not doing too poorly, but it's not doing too great either, right? You can't really call this an alt season. And then you have other stuff like ADA, for example, that is incredibly strong. It's one of the other outliers, which doesn't look bad. And then you have Bitcoin Cash, looks incredibly shitty. XRP looks incredibly shitty. EOS looks incredibly shitty. TRX incredibly shitty. And like this is where all the confusion comes from, I think, when you're talking about alt season, is that you have these older coins, these more established coins, doing incredibly poorly. I mean, this is barely a bounce, if anything, on BNB, for example. And then you have stronger moves on DeFi stuff. I mean, Chainlink does belong to it a little bit, but it's still looking like even Chainlink is looking kind of rough on the high time frames against Bitcoin, right? So, I mean, it depends on kind of where you're looking at. I don't really want to say all coins are doing poorly or all coins are doing really well, because it's not really true. Like, they're not doing poorly and they're not doing great. Because, I mean, DeFi is doing pretty damn well. And some of the old coins are doing, like, outperforming Bitcoin actually. But most of these are not. So it's kind of like, it's not something that I would call old season, but then again, you have some coins that are doing really well. So it pays a lot more these days to kind of look at these more interesting coins rather than being stuck in something like this that just looks like it's going to keel over.
And that's the thing, right? I don't think people realize how shit a lot of people's altcoin allocations are, right? People love to point to, like, Aave, SNX, YFI, Uni, Sushi, etc. And to our credit, we also get bashed on Technical Roundup for being like, for missing altcoins, whatever. That just shows that people don't actually read at least the written version of Technical Roundup, because we've been riding a lot of those quite positively, right? Sushi, Uni, YFI at the literal bottom, like, we're aware that there are some altcoins which are doing incredibly well. Just the whole point is there needs to be the correct kind of sectoral skew in order to catch it, right? That's sort of the point you're making.
And that's why I really don't like the notion of, okay, win all season. Because, if you're looking at this and you're chilling in this, you're obviously thinking, okay, all coins are doing really well. And then if you're sitting in EOS, you've had the worst year of your life, basically, looking at Bitcoin going from nothing to 40K while you're bleeding out of every hole in your body. I mean, this is just incredibly brutal, right?
Tezos as well, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there has to be a distinction made, right? So you have ETH outperforming, which, I mean, that's pretty impressive in its own right, given that the entire narrative is basically Bitcoin based and ETH's just been stronger. And I still don't see a good reason to be bearish ETH. I mean, at least against Bitcoin, just based on the fact that, I mean, this is the opposite of what we're talking about on Bitcoin, right? Oh, Jesus. Let me actually get...
it looks like a multi-year breakout, like, at the cusp.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't want to be bearish this. I like to be long exposed ETH much more than like to be short exposed ETH. Now, if this breaks down again, right, that's a different story. But I think the best kind of way to trade this entire, whatever you want to call it, I mean, people are calling it old season because they're sitting in the right altcoins. Other people are calling it doom season because they're sitting in the wrong altcoins, right? But whatever you want to call this, I think the best way to play it is just looking for the strong ones and then trading those. And if you want to be less exposed to the market, something that you can do is long the strong ones, short the weak ones, right? And then if the altcoin sector as a whole goes up, you still profit from the stronger one. And if the whole altcoin sector is going down, the shitty looking one is going to perform way worse than the good looking one. So they're going to make money regardless. So that's kind of like the way that I've been approaching these altcoins. People are just kind of like mad that, I mean, you can be bearish some of these and bullish others.
Yeah.
I think I much prefer this kind of environment where it actually matters what you're looking at. So,
sure.
I mean, if you're in XRP sitting in this and you've just hoped that you're going to get bailed out by old season, it's just not happening. I much prefer that, where you don't really have the market on one side. So you're either wrong or right, because in this kind of circumstances, you can be wrong on the altcoin direction as a whole and still make money if you just kind of guess or kind of have a good guess on which altcoins are going to outperform which one. So, I mean, if you're looking at XRP and you've been short this for a while and long some other ones that are stronger, you're having a really good time, right? Whereas if you're doing the opposite, I mean, it's probably not as good. Rotation happens only in certain coins for a reason. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's kind of like, I think this entire rally has been a little bit less focused on retail. So you don't really get this, okay, XRP is super cheap. I mean, you still get idiots that talk about it like this. I mean, Keemstar is the best example. Just keeps buying XRP. I mean, he's been buying XRP for ages. Guys down a shitload. It just doubles and triples and quadruples down while everything else is going up like crazy. I mean, you'd have to kind of, against USD even more so, right? If you're looking at XRP, you're not even up against USD, while everything else is up quite a bit, and even more. I mean, the easiest kind of bet, Bitcoin being up a shitload more. So, I mean, you still have some of those, but I think given that it's less retail focused, it makes a lot of sense that you get interest in projects that actually sound interesting, try to do something interesting in comparison to ones that are not. But I mean,
I find it really bizarre how we seem to attract this reputation of either altcoin bears or like DeFi bears, which for me is wild. As someone who's been positioning and also writing, which is publicly available to everyone, about literally the best DeFi performers, right? And arguing for literally weeks on end that these are good, these are secular strong trends. If you're going to position in those, and to be reading the chat, oh man, whatever. It's really bizarre. Maybe I'm missing something.
No, it's just a few people that don't really understand how trading and in general markets work. Where it's not like, okay, you have to kind of bet it all on the entire market exploding or not. I mean, there's these pairs for a reason, right? If you just wanted to trade this one market, there must be an index for that on FTX. I bet there is.
What, a DeFi index?
No, just like in general market index. If not, we just probably should talk with Sam about it. As in like money entering the crypto sphere and money leaving the crypto sphere. But yeah, I mean, this is the best example of how to kind of trade this new paradigm, right? If you've been positioned in sushi ever since it's shown strength, right? I mean, you don't even have to buy these bottoms. The moment like this showed strength was in here. So, funnily enough, that was the first time that we actually wrote about it in Technical Roundup. That was where it showed strength, right? It reclaimed this resistance and turned it into support. And then it went up a shitload. And yeah, you could have made it a bunch more being long from all the way down here to up here, right? That's a massive gain. But this is also a massive gain, and it's the one where you don't have to be showing a lot of faith in the project, because, I mean, the hard work's been done for you down here, right? The people that buy here risk this going to absolute shit, while the people that are buying here have an invalidation, one, and two, they're positioning in a position like in a market that is showing strength, right? So they know, okay, there's buying power there, and yeah, I don't know. I find this much better of a buy than down here.
It's like Bitcoin below or above 6K, right?
Yeah.
It's like, do you want to buy above 6K and it's going to double in like a couple months or however long that took? Or do you want to be buying below 6K with the uncertainty of time, or how low is it going to really go? Could it even go to zero, etc., etc.? And there's also the mental capital phenomenon of it. The people who even bought below 6, because of the chop they had to endure and that release from, you know, a range which looked like it was going to go on forever, a lot of them were selling hella early, right? That breakthrough 4.8 or whatever that range high was, that felt like, you know, if you've been holding the chop from like a 5K, 4K, even 3K entry, or in the 3000s, and then you finally get an impulse up and it's retesting 6K, like, you're gonna not have the easiest time holding that position kind of through resistance. Whereas if you're buying above 6K, like 65, 6600, etc., in terms of at least mental capital management, you're having a way easier time on those trades than someone with a better entry. So that's kind of what I mean. The lowest entry isn't necessarily the best entry. But a lot of the time, there's strong egos attached to joining a trend if you didn't catch it from the bottom, which in my view is mistaken. Something we wrote about as well. I think it goes back to a lot of 2017 crap where people just where the cycles were literally not just sectoral, it's literally everything that was listed would pump, right? And so it was just a matter of, does your thing look quote unquote bottomed out, which means just moving sideways and doing nothing, and then you just wait for some bloody pump and dump group to go through it. And that was like smart market cycle positioning. Whereas now you kind of have to look at, where are the strong trends, and there's no quote unquote shame in getting involved in those, and it's been pretty rewarding in the context of a lot of these instruments. And these are clean trends as well,
Yeah, Johnny is still in the chat saying .usd massive banana shaped accumulation of 6 months.
Okay.
What boggles my mind is that when people come on, don't really know. We kind of stream a lot. We write newsletters, and we actually talked about DOT and its massive moon before it happened in the newsletter, right? So you kind of, not the biggest early kind of moon, but
it was at this support. This is I think the first time we put up a DOT chart was with this cluster here, and the argument was this is one of those instruments that had a big breakout and is trending up. When it's trending up, you get impulse cluster, impulse cluster, impulse cluster, etc. And as long as the clusters hold as support and they aren't violated, it's going to go up a lot. Held the range low, just kept going up, and then we've got another cluster here. So, even just from the bottom of that cluster to the high, or to the highest close, whatever, that's like 100%. We're aware. We know this stuff.
That's the weird part, right? You always get shit from people that don't actually read your shit, which is so annoying because you have to argue against shit that you've actually, that you've actually said, right? It's whatever. I don't have the mental capacity to kind of deal with that shit.
Yeah, it's kind of just arguing in bad faith, right? If you're going to present criticism, which I'll love to address, even though trading is not a fucking team sport.
Yeah.
At least have a basic understanding, or at least ask, our views. Like, do you think DeFi is bullish? Just literally maybe ask that, get our view, and then we can sort of discuss the minutiae. But it's very weird for instruments that you've traded in and also charted and shared whatever bullishly to then say that you don't understand anything because you've missed out on these bullish moves, when it's just not true. Like, what other counter argument can you make at that point?
Yep.
Weird, very, very weird. So where do you see? So we talked about Bitcoin, right? ETH do you have like an ETH USD take? Because I agree, ETH BTC looks really strong. I've got a similar level on the weekly here through this range high, and that just looks like if this is like one of those multi-year breakouts, right? Because if you look at where this level comes from, this is like towards the end of 2018, we've essentially been in a range, right? So if this breakout holds, essentially, there's just so much room. It's about at least 50%, but more importantly, this looks like candles for several weeks to fill in basically most of this dump before coming into an area closer to 0.05. So that's a lot of space to capture on the upside, and I would generally expect that type of environment to correspond with ETH breaking through all-time high. I think that's when you see really the acceleration in the BTC pair. Obviously, when the USD pair enters price discovery, it's really hard for anything to outperform that point in a market. So that would make sense in terms of ETH. Just to be clear, just like I argued for Bitcoin, that once I get a market structure reversal set up, I'd rather risk a lot there than risk less in the potential chop zone. I think that's an important distinction. I think ETH, in a kind of similar vein, I'd rather look for the all-time, post all-time high trade rather than getting back in around the range high, whatever. Because if your argument, or if you're kind of relying on the analogy with Bitcoin, that Bitcoin broke its all-time high in 2x, so ETH all-time high break will also be a bullish catalyst, I think that's pretty reasonable. But as a result, why would I want to be buying the potential range high or retest or whatever it may be, this kind of move here, if I could just not chase, but essentially tag on when the market looks much stronger, right? It just doesn't make sense, to me at least. The argument being, ETH looks good, so get involved kind of here. Whereas my argument is, that I risk buying the top or the range or just the worst entry. I'd much rather miss kind of this portion and then catch the acceleration through all-time high in a much more kind of risk-defined manner and in a way that would allow me to put more size on that position? Like, what's the more straightforward trade? The post all-time high expansion or the potential range high, God knows what if we start ranging, etc., etc.? It's kind of the same for Bitcoin, right? What kind of trade or what circumstances warrant higher conviction positioning? Is it this kind of underside retest? Maybe this is a lower high, maybe it chops, whatever. Or is it the clear lower low into a higher high that you can then full send into price discovery, right? In my opinion, I'd much rather get a worse entry in terms of price, but a lot of the time the worse entry makes for an easier trade. So I'm more than happy to be patient in those circumstances.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, for me, ETH's just kind of ranging. It's the range that I've drawn out on Wednesday, where I was like, with these kind of retests, right? Whenever you get like a breakout into a retest, you want to be buying the first one. You don't want to be buying the second one, right? And I mean, you can kind of see what happened on the second one. It's just completely broke down. This is the first retest, and then the second one just completely died. And for me, it's at resistance right now. I want to see it back above there before expecting anything higher again. And I could see this chop for a longer while too. But it's definitely, I mean, something that you have to notice on this one is just much stronger right now than Bitcoin. Yeah. I mean, it broke new highs. Bitcoin did not. Something that the only reason why I'm even daring to like say, okay, I could expect Bitcoin to kind of just go sideways, chop, or even break down is because of that fact. Whenever I see ETH make new highs while Bitcoin cannot, I just focus my shift and I'm expecting Bitcoin to underperform and in general just to go down. Doesn't have to hold like that forever, right? Bitcoin, I mean, it's been so strong that I could just see this just reclaim this entire thing and it just go up. But whenever that happens, it's something that you can look back in the history of these two assets. Whenever you see ETH break highs while Bitcoin cannot, it's usually not really bullish for Bitcoin. Usually leads to a dump for Bitcoin, and then I mean ETH can still outperform. And that's the beauty of these altcoins, right? I mean, ETH USD can go up while Bitcoin goes down, just based on the fact that it has this ETH BTC pair that can just relentlessly moon. I mean, it doesn't have to, but I mean, with this kind of setup, I hope it does, just based on the fact that that would lead to, I think, risk on for more altcoins, not necessarily all of them. I mean, if you're looking at some of these, they just look so trash that I wouldn't expect them to move.
You know what? I'm going to post in the chat the most recent technical roundup. I'm going to spam it. And there's a section there called Making Reasonable Altcoin Choices, right? And we talk about the stuff we have no idea about, which is the DeFi pairs, trend following, and following stuff that's actually strong, new, what to expect from ETH, etc. So if you're interested, go ahead and read it, and make sure to sign up. It's free, by the way, technicalroundup.com, to get it every Tuesday. But yeah, in terms of the effect, like a longer form of what the Doug's essentially saying, like the impact that an ETH BTC multi-week, multi-month breakout would have, our thoughts and some charts from the DeFi stuff are available in that link below. Apparently, we need to restate that.
Yeah. A question of Leo. Do you still believe in altcoin USD capitulation scenario before alt season? It depends on which altcoins you're looking at. If you're looking at EOS, for example, I'd be very surprised if that didn't happen. If you're looking at XRP, same deal, right? If you're looking at TRX, same. If you're looking at ETH, I'm not entirely sure, just based on the fact that it's like so strong, way stronger than it's been in the past during like this kind of Bitcoin cycle. Like whenever Bitcoin went completely vertical, Jesus Christ, I need to clean this. Whenever Bitcoin went completely vertical, usually ETH BTC didn't show this much strength, right? So I wouldn't necessarily expect USD capitulation on this pair, just based on the fact that ETH BTC is so strong. So it depends, is my answer. It depends, and that's kind of the newfound beauty of this market, where some look really strong and some behave really strong, and some look really shitty and behave really weakly, right? I mean, Dash, I mean, God forbid this pumps like 5x after I say this, but I mean, this just looks complete trash, right? And no one can tell me otherwise.
10x it right now. Not...
Come again?
It's a 10x it right now, right this second, as soon as you finish your sentence.
But I mean, I've been covering this for a long time. I've actually been covering this, and people said to me, "You're turning bearish after this long of a move down back here," and that's been like years ago now, or like a year ago, where it's like, yeah, I don't really mind turning bearish on a breakdown like this, because I mean, you can, just because something is down 90% doesn't mean it cannot go down like another 90%. And I'm going to be bearish on these altcoins until they reverse, right? And I'm going to say altcoin Bitcoin pairs that look like this are probably going to continue following the trend, and the trend is down, right? And then you have other altcoins that are showing bullish trends where I wouldn't make the same comment. So it depends on every single altcoin this time around, which makes the entire situation much more difficult for people like us, where it's like you talk about a limited amount of altcoins, and then every single time someone comes in the chat and it's like, dude, you're saying altcoins are doing poorly, but my altcoin went up 500x. And it's like, yeah, dude, it's just how this market works now. You have some altcoins that do really well, and then some, or the most of them, that do really shitty. So depends. I'm expecting like stuff like this still, like the altcoin, the big altcoin move for like most of these coins in general to come off of Bitcoin going down. So, I mean, let's say Bitcoin goes 70, 80K, breaks down to whatever, 40, bounces from 40 to 60. I'd expect the altcoins to outperform on that bounce rather than on the way to 80K. It just doesn't make much sense for Bitcoin to go parabolic and then the altcoins to just outperform it. Can happen. I mean, we've had some do it, but the large majority of these altcoins just haven't. And I wouldn't expect the altcoins to massively outperform once Bitcoin actually has put in the top. Maybe for a short while, but not like longer term. I would expect them to outperform once people realize, okay, Bitcoin might have put in the top and it's going to be a little bit slower, because what Bitcoin likes to do after it's put in the top, and who knows where that's going to be, is just go sideways. So people just kind of front run that sideways business by buying capitulation on the altcoins when Bitcoin capitulates, and then get a massive altcoin move during that time, and then Bitcoin goes sideways and altcoins can do whatever they want to. That's kind of my view on how I'm expecting these to play out. It depends on what kind of market you follow, right? This could ring true for the ones that I follow, and I mean, so far it has. All of these look like complete trash, and then you have some other ones, and I mean, I have Cred to thank for that, because he's kind of beat me into the DeFi stuff. That is actually performing really, really well, and actually giving really good setups too. Like Sushi gave a good setup, Uni gave good setups.
Dot,
I mean,
YFI at the range low. But no, yeah, we have no idea, man. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
So it's kind of like, it depends. I mean, YFI is not really the prettiest chart against the Bitcoin pair either, for me right now. This is just kind of, at best, it's choppy. And I mean, for me, this just kind of looks like it wants to put in these lower highs over and over and over again. So far, we haven't broken this low, so nothing terrible. If this should break down, that would look pretty shitty, right?
I think the USD pair needs to trend on YFI, which should come as no surprise. I think I haven't actually checked the level that I've got. Yeah, it's just been chopping at the range high around 35K or thereabouts for me. But at the same time, it's been bouncing off midpoint at 26, 27. But every time it's kind of stabbed above 35 or thereabouts, it's kind of been rejected. Whereas with a lot of these, thing is, a lot of the really strong, as you'd expect, when you have a strong trend, you don't really get fake outs per se. Certainly not on big levels, range breakouts, flips, etc. Like if you look at Sushi, for example, all the breakout levels have held. And generally, that type of behavior is very reliable and happens from level to level. Maybe something like this is necessary, either drawing this lower high cluster or whatever, but as should come as no surprise, if the 30s get cleared, then you have new highs in the USD pair and a break from would be at that point quite a long consolidation. That'll probably kind of mend the BTC pair, right? And that's kind of the whole point. There's like a counter argument being made that, well, it depends what coins you hold, etc., etc. Some of these are doing incredibly well. Well, yes, that's the point we're making. But if you take any kind of orthodox understanding of alt season, it's non-sectoral, right? It's like everything on Binance is just up like 40% against Bitcoin on the day. That's sort of what that means. So the argument we've been making the whole time is actually look at DeFi stuff, look at stuff that's trending strongly, kind of irrespective of where the majors are at, and make use of those conditions while they're intact. And if ETH breaks out, great, they'll probably lend some support to those conditions in the medium term. In the short term, I think there may be a window if ETH makes a new all-time high when the DeFi pairs underperform relative to ETH, but still just for the altcoin market, that'd be a nice scenario anyway. And look, if you have no idea what kind of altcoins do and you don't want to trade them, you don't know the tickers, you get confused. If ETH breaks all-time high, I still think, especially given the price action we've had recently and the rejection from the all-time high, all the kind of fuckeries we've had, like a real all-time high break like we had in Bitcoin, if that happens on ETH, that's just going to be a really attractive trade. So that you don't need to sort of say, okay, ETH has broken all-time high, which altcoins do I ape into to take advantage of it? It's like, well, ETH, right? So that's something else worth bearing in mind. But yeah, look, if you have a market which is giving very liquid, very widely traded, good narratives, first market cycles, strong trends, respects technical levels very nicely, I mean, bloody trade them, right? No one's telling you not to. Just the point is, don't call it alt season necessarily, because most people, or a lot of people, aren't holding these instruments. And for them, alt season is outperformance in their shitcoin bags and everything on Binance, and it's kind of an indiscriminate outperformance relative to Bitcoin, as opposed to a specific sector which is doing well irrespective of how Bitcoin or Ethereum is doing, right? That's kind of our argument, is this stuff is strong on its own, irrespective of market conditions more broadly, etc. It trades well technically, so just use it. And then whether the majors catalyze that to the upside or add some pressure to that, whatever, it almost doesn't matter because they've not really been correlated all too strongly.
Well said.
God.
But yeah, it's no use of getting worked up over it. It's just explaining that over and over again is kind of getting
it's
tired.
It's months of explaining this, it feels, at this point, right? It's like,
yes.
I still have to explain via DMs like why your alt BTC pair still matters to some extent, and kind of how to use that. And it's like having the up in USD discussions from 2017 to 2018 when these altcoins didn't even have USD pairs, right? That was the crazy part about that discussion. Everyone's like, I'm up USD in their altcoin portfolios. Like, really, how are you going to cash that out? It's like, well, I trade the altcoin to BTC and then sell BTC. It's like, well, okay, well, how much up in USD would you be if you just held Bitcoin? It's like, well, more. Like, so you lost. No, I didn't. I'm up in USD. It's like, oh my God. A lot of these discussions we're having now are very reminiscent of people, back in the day.
Yeah, and I mean, I honestly, I minded having to go over these discussions in 17. I'm just not gonna have them this time around. I've conceded the fact that, I mean, it's just not gonna help. It's just how it is, right? It's how market cycles work. You have a market cycle, you go through all of it, and then it ends, and the new one comes around, and then new people come around, and you have to do it like. At least in our position, you have to explain it all over again. It's literally the same thing, same kind of narrative, same kind of everything. I'm not gonna argue anymore. It's just, if you have a different opinion, if you think altcoin Bitcoin pairs are useless, I think it's just bad.
Have fun staying poor.
But I mean, I'm not gonna argue anymore. It just doesn't make much sense.
But I do recommend people read what I spammed in the chat earlier, because we basically express our framework. It's the section's called Making Reasonable Altcoin Choices, and kind of explain it without getting angry as to what sort of things to be looking for in altcoins generally, what they look like, the sort of behaviors they're telling you to get in, get out. That's sort of I think all it takes on that word. And there's also a point made which is important about relative strength. A lot of the time, in maybe 2017, 2018 PTSD behavior from a lot of people, they just don't like stuff that has already moved because they feel that they're late. A lot of the time, that's really stupid. We felt extremely late, even adding sushi to the newsletter, right? When it was at whatever, $2. because it had gone up so much. But it doesn't, as a technical trader, those terms mean nothing. Like, I missed longs I should have taken at like, I remember like 13.1 and also through 15, etc., because I felt like the market had gone up too much. And also just mentally for me, I was like, well, 1 Bitcoin for 15k, no fucking way am I longing that on leverage, right? Really stupid reasoning, with the benefit of hindsight, obviously, because those things shouldn't ultimately matter, at least if you're short-term technical trading. So play the strength if it's there. The fact that it's there is a privilege, as long as you know how to identify when it's no longer there. That's pretty much.
I like it. Yeah. I think that's pretty much all we're gonna have to say about it.
I mentioned that Trajan
slowly.
Yeah, the brain rot from this is bad, dude. Split Capital was asking, he was asking for questions about joining trends late and all that sort of stuff. And I was discussing it with him, as in, for a lot of DeFi stuff, he said it's probably better to FOMO buy into a new trend than to miss out and remain bitter. Discuss below. And I said strength can remain strong longer than you can remain self-loathing, right? Which is a reasonable way to go about this. And look, if you end up joining a trend on what should have been a support resistance flip, right? Like, let's say the whole time a market's just been doing this, you've got resistance, it breaks, it comes back and flips, it comes back and flips, whatever, or you get a breakout, higher low in the same place, breakout, higher low in the same place, etc. And then you finally think, okay, I'm going to pull the trigger, and you enter here, or like you enter on this higher low, and the trend reverses. That's kind of fine, right? It's still, that doesn't mean it's a bad trade. I mean, the outcome might be bad, but for me, that kind of trade logic is fine, because if you, like, at a certain point, if you're trend following or using those sorts of patterns, you almost inevitably will be the top, right? If you're executing every single setup that comes up. But the whole idea is you've executed 3, 4, 5, multiple setups in between. The fact that you missed one of them, or the fact that one of them is wrong, becomes inconsequential to the returns generated by that strategy, right? I think there's an emotional attachment to, oh, I bought the top. Well, if you just treat it as another trade, and it was clearly defined and blah, 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 the fact that the fact that you bog yourself down that it was a top is purely kind of emotional cope. It doesn't fucking matter. You took a setup, it proved to you that it was no longer active. As long as you don't keep it buying every single dip or knife catch on the way down far after you're invalidated, it really doesn't matter. When that happens, you see that shift in behavior, like it's no longer flipping support resistance levels, like it fails for the first time, or instead of making a higher low, it's actually made a lower low, etc. As long as you get out in time and then reshift or reallocate your focus to stuff that still looks like it's trending or bullish, I think that's the best way to play it.
Yeah. It's basically the same argument that I'm trying to make for Bitcoin on the daily.
Yeah.
Which is, it has finally broken this kind of movement of just at least, these kind of tests, right? We've had one test, and this is something that I've noted a few days ago, where it's like we've tested this here, and then we tested it again, right? So that was already something kind of new that we didn't really have before, where you just kind of test the support twice, which is crazy if you're talking about any other market, right? I mean, just testing the support twice shouldn't be something out of the ordinary. That's not happened before in pretty much any of this rally besides the 10K area, where sailors just kept on buying everything up. And so you could argue, okay, this has changed. If it hasn't and it's showing strength, then yeah, that was wrong. That idea was wrong. And you just get up and have some fun in the high digits on Bitcoin. But as long as that doesn't change, because we have clearly broken down, I would be a little bit more cautious.
Yeah, like when you have prices near an area of price discovery, you essentially have the privilege of taking longs close to it, which end up being higher probability, which isn't what you normally get, right? Like in a ranging market, for example, if you're buying closer to the range high, like the chances that you're wrong or that your risk reward gets fucked up are kind of worse, right? If you're anticipating resistance or continuation in a range bound market. But when you're so close to all-time high, as it actually approaches the all-time high point, as weird as it may sound, at least for me, resistance kind of gets weaker, right? So it makes sense in those cases to look for later but better longs, rather than potentially buy what could be a retest of the underside or more chop, etc., hoping to catch that extra move. Like, if your argument is it's going to enter price discovery and trend anyway, then why are you forcing yourself to take the weaker entries that are available in the chart itself if it's like an extra few percent to fight for? Like, as I said, I don't mind buying after the higher high or through all-time high, because I know that'll be the easier trade than whatever this is.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, would you have rather bought here and held, or would you have rather bought here and held?
Yeah.
I mean, the end result is if you held this the entire way up, you have more money. But you also lost 10 years of your life, your wife, your car, your children. I mean, you get what I'm saying, right? Because this is clearly the better area to be involved in the market. Yes, this is lower, but that doesn't really matter, right? This is the area where you this is much, much more fun. And this is going to be much, much more rewarding than this one is. And I mean, the result of having to go through something like this, even disregarding that anyone sane would have actually, if you bought here, would have gotten stopped out on any of these candles, really. But even if you didn't, I mean, the difference between these two, even though the time is not really that much different. I mean, it's January of 2020 to end of 2020. I mean, timing wise, that's not much of a difference, but this is just a clearly better trade. It's the same thing all over the chart. You don't really have to always catch the bottom. The only kind of thing that you have to look out for is when you get these clean trades. And like Cred said, it's oftentimes when you just run out of resistances that you just start booking it. Yeah. And that's happened for Bitcoin, right? Even if you bought 20K, you have had a lot of fun. You doubled your balance in 4 weeks. And that's much more enjoyable than, even if you bought 6K down here and just held this is just pain holding from here through all of this.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've had to deal with. Some of the new crypto participants just bought these traditional markets guys just bought 20K and are laughing. And I mean, I can't say anything about it, right? Because buying 20K was clearly just a better use of time, right? You just stuck trading this. You're kind of suffering while traditional markets kind of did really well. And then these traditional markets guys come in, buy 20K and doubles from there.
Yeah.
So
the lowest entry isn't necessarily the best entry. The earliest entry isn't necessarily the best entry either. Those are just biases that I think are kind of half ego, but also kind of peer pressure, maybe from crypto Twitter, kind of, buying the bottom is like a token of, I don't know, prestige or something. Just all sorts of weird shit that doesn't actually help you in trading, in my opinion. This is something I've actually only been getting better at in the last, year or so, year and a half maybe, that I'm still working on it. It's a work in progress, but completely abandoning the idea of late, early, expensive, cheap, whatever, and just acting when the market itself is behaving in a way that I can take advantage of, as opposed to, oh, well, I could have bought here, or, if I had bought that low, I wouldn't be buying up here. All this kind of cope psychological crap, the market doesn't really care about it. And the condition, and if people will take these conditions we have now for granted, but if you traded some of the stuff that Don highlighted, the really shitty periods of crypto, you don't know how good you have it now, when everything moves, levels work, TA, all of that kind of stuff. It's really hard to go wrong if you basically survive and pay attention, right? But as a result, it's worth taking advantage of those conditions, because they're not always going to last, and the chances are, especially if you're not experienced, your ability to generate returns when conditions shift, even just from trending to ranging, doesn't even matter bullish or bearish. Your ability to print is going to be so severely impaired that you'll be kicking yourself for not taking more setups when they were available. So,
well said. Well said.
I think we've covered enough ground. Maybe just rename the stream to an unapologetic, right? It's like a fucking defense of technical roundup or whatever.
Yeah, it always sucks when you don't get enough recognition for what you put out.
I think it's because we don't perform enough autofellatio, right? We should have just taken the the sushi chart and the dot chart and all these other charts, the YFI at the range low, link, etc., and just drawn big circles, arrows, open mouth YouTube thumbnail and posted it on Twitter, oh my god, look at this call. I suppose having, not doing that is at our own expense. Whatever, I'm sure people who read it like it, and we're grateful for those who come to hang out with us, being on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday newsletter. Really can't get away from us at certain point in the certain points during the
Never
week.
ends.
Exactly. Duck, any final comments, thoughts, concerns, wisdoms?
No, not really. Not really. Thanks for coming by, guys.
Great. Nothing else from me either. Thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you to Bybit, of course, for their support. They certainly don't question us like that. Make sure to like the video if you haven't already, or if you liked anything we had to say. Subscribe to the channel. We are approaching 14k, unlike Bitcoin, hopefully. And I'll see you on Monday for my session. Take care. Have a safe, productive, chart-infused weekend, and we'll see you on the other side. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.